The crack of breaking bone silenced 282 soldiers instantly. Staff Sergeant Marcus Holt collapsed to the ground, screaming, his right arm bent at an angle that made grown men look away. Standing over him was Elena Reyes, 5'3", 130 pounds, and completely calm. 3 hours earlier, he had called her a disgrace to the uniform. Now he was being loaded onto a stretcher, his military career shattered along with his arm. Fort Braxton, North Carolina. June 15th, 2019. A morning that would change everything. This is that story. If you want to see how one man's arrogance destroyed his entire future, subscribe now and stay until the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Elena Reyes woke up at 4:47 a.m., 13 minutes before her alarm was set to go off. She didn't need to check the date. She knew exactly what day it was. June 15th, the anniversary of her father's death, and the day that would determine whether everything she had worked for would finally mean something. She sat on the edge of her bed in the darkness of her small base housing unit, her feet touching the cold floor. On her nightstand sat a photograph she had carried with her through basic training, through combat school, through every transfer and every assignment for the past 10 years. Master Sergeant Antonio Reyes, her father, the man who had taught her to fight before she could ride a bicycle, the man who had died saving 6 members of his team in Afghanistan when she was 16 years old. "Today's the day, Dad," she whispered to the photograph. "I hope I make you proud." She showered, dressed in her combat uniform, and spent 20 minutes in front of the mirror, practicing the breathing techniques that had gotten her through every difficult moment of her military career. In through the nose hold for 4 counts, out through the mouth. Control the breath, control the mind. Control the mind, control the outcome. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Sergeant First Class Diana Webb, her mentor and the closest thing she had to family in the Army. "Ready for today?" Elena typed back. "Born ready." Diana's response came immediately. "Liar. Meet me at the Chow Hall in 20. We need to talk before this thing starts." Elena smiled despite her nerves. Diana always knew when she was putting on a brave face. The Chow Hall was nearly empty when Elena arrived. Most soldiers were still sleeping or just beginning their morning routines. Diana sat alone at a corner table, 2 cups of coffee already waiting. "You look like hell," Diana said as Elena sat down. "Thanks. You really know how to boost morale." "I'm serious." Diana leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Did you sleep at all last night?" "Enough." "Elena." 3 hours. Maybe 4. Elena wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. "I kept going over the demonstration in my head. Every technique, every transition, every possible question they might ask." Diana nodded slowly. And I'm ready. I know I'm ready. But there's this voice in my head that keeps telling me I'm going to fail, that I'm going to embarrass myself in front of 300 soldiers, that Colonel Whitmore made a mistake by giving me this opportunity. That voice is a liar. I know. Do you... Diana reached across the table and gripped Elena's wrist. "Listen to me carefully. I've been in this army for 22 years. I've trained with operators from every branch, every special unit, every elite program this country has. And I have never seen anyone with your natural ability for hand-to-hand combat. Your father was legendary, but Elena, you're better than he ever was." Elena's eyes widened. "Don't say that." "It's true. Antonio was my friend. He was one of the finest soldiers I ever served with. But he told me himself, about 6 months before he deployed for the last time, that you had surpassed him. He said watching you train was like watching water flow. Everything was natural, effortless, perfect. Elena felt tears threatening to form and blinked them back rapidly. He never told me that. He was going to. He had this whole speech planned for when he got back from that deployment. Diana's voice caught slightly. He never got the chance. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of memory hanging between them. "There's something else you need to know," Diana said finally. "Something about today." Elena looked up. "What?" "I did some checking on the soldiers who'll be attending the demonstration. Most of them are fine, professional, open-minded, ready to learn. But there's one name that concerns me." "Who?" "Staff Sergeant Marcus Holt, infantry. 3 combat deployments, multiple commendations for valor." Diana paused. "And a reputation for causing problems." "What kind of problems?" "The kind that involves female soldiers filing complaints that mysteriously go nowhere. The kind that involves junior enlisted being too scared to speak up. The kind that involves superiors looking the other way because he's got connections and a combat record." Elena felt her stomach tighten. "Why is he attending my demonstration?" "Because Colonel Whitmore specifically requested representation from every unit on base. Holt's company commander couldn't find a way to exclude him without raising questions." Diana's expression hardened. "I'm telling you this because you need to be prepared. He's going to try something. I don't know what, but I can feel it. Then I'll handle it." "Elena, I mean it." Elena's voice was steady now, the nervousness replaced by something harder. "I've dealt with men like Holt my entire career. They talk big, they try to intimidate, they think that being loud and aggressive makes them powerful. But they're hollow inside. They're scared of anything that challenges their worldview." Diana studied her for a long moment. "Your father used to say something similar." "I know. He's the one who taught me." The training ground at Fort Braxton covered nearly 3 acres of packed earth and carefully maintained grass. By 800 hours, soldiers had begun arriving from every corner of the base, forming loose groups that gradually coalesced into a massive crowd. Elena stood at the edge of the designated demonstration area, watching them gather. 282 soldiers, according to the official roster. Officers, enlisted specialists, sergeants. Men and women from 6 different units, all here to evaluate a hand-to-hand combat program that she had developed over the past 3 years. Colonel James Whitmore approached her with a warm smile. He was in his late 50s, his hair gone gray at the temples, but he moved with the easy confidence of a man who had spent his entire adult life in uniform. "Elena," he said, extending his hand. "How are you feeling?" "Honestly terrified." Whitmore laughed. "Good. Your father always said that the day you stopped feeling fear before combat was the day you stopped being effective." His expression softened. "He would be incredibly proud of you. You know that, right?" "I hope so, sir." "I don't hope. I know." Whitmore glanced at the growing crowd. "This is your moment. Everything you've worked for, everything you've sacrificed, it all comes down to the next few hours. Show them what you can do, and this program will be implemented across the entire army. Every soldier in every unit will learn the techniques you've developed. And if I fail, you won't. But if I do," Whitmore's eyes met hers directly, "then you'll have failed in front of 300 witnesses, your program will be rejected, and you'll spend the rest of your career knowing that you had one shot and you missed it." He smiled slightly. "But that's not going to happen. I've seen you train. I've seen the results of your methods. Today you're going to prove to everyone what I already know, that you're one of the most talented combat instructors this army has ever produced." Elena took a deep breath. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me. Just show them who you are." As Whitmore walked away to take his position among the observers, Elena began her final preparations. She stretched her muscles methodically, running through the sequence she had performed thousands of times. Each movement was precise, controlled, designed to prepare her body for the physical demands of the demonstration. Diana appeared beside her. "He's here." Elena didn't need to ask who. She followed Diana's gaze to a cluster of infantry soldiers on the far side of the training ground. Staff Sergeant Marcus Holt was impossible to miss. He stood 6'4" with shoulders that seemed to strain against his uniform and arms that were thicker than Elena's thighs. His face was handsome, in a brutal way, with a jaw that looked like it had been carved from stone and eyes that held the kind of cold intensity that made people look away. He was laughing at something one of his companions had said, but even from this distance Elena could see that his attention was fixed on her. "He's been staring since he arrived," Diana muttered. "Hasn't taken his eyes off you for more than a few seconds." "Let him stare." "Elena, I'm serious. There's something wrong with that man. I've seen soldiers with 1,000-yard stare before, but this is different. This is predatory." "Good." Elena finished her stretching and straightened to her full height, such as it was. "That means he's already thinking about me instead of what he's supposed to be learning. If he tries something, he'll be off balance, emotional, predictable." Diana shook her head slowly. "Sometimes you scare me. I learned from the best." At precisely 0830 hours, Colonel Whitmore called the assembled soldiers to attention and introduced Elena to the crowd. "Today's demonstration will be conducted by Specialist Elena Reyes," he announced. "Many of you may recognize the name. Her father, Master Sergeant Antonio Reyes, was one of the finest soldiers this army has ever produced. He gave his life protecting his team during Operation Enduring Freedom, and he left behind a legacy that his daughter has not only honored, but exceeded." Elena felt the weight of those words settling on her shoulders. She stepped forward to address the crowd, acutely aware that nearly 300 pairs of eyes were fixed on her. "Thank you, Colonel Whitmore." Her voice was clear and strong, carrying across the training ground, without need for amplification. "Over the next few hours, I'm going to teach you techniques that could save your life in close combat situations. These techniques are not about size or strength. They're about leverage timing and using your opponent's force against them." She paused, scanning the crowd. Her eyes found Holt, who was watching her with unconcealed disdain. "Some of you may be skeptical," she continued. "You may look at me and think that there's no way someone my size could effectively fight someone larger and stronger. That's exactly what I'm hoping you think, because that's what your enemies will think too. And that assumption will be their last mistake." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some soldiers nodded appreciatively. Others exchanged glances that ranged from curious to doubtful. And in the back, Marcus Holt laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. Elena ignored him and began the demonstration. The first hour went smoothly. She worked with a series of volunteers demonstrating techniques that ranged from basic defensive positions to complex joint manipulation maneuvers. Each volunteer was larger than her, some significantly so, and each one found themselves neutralized with startling efficiency. Private Rodriguez, a stocky man with wrestling experience, tried to take her down with a standard double-leg tackle. Elena sprawled, caught his arm, and had him tapping out in under 4 seconds. Sergeant Williams, a kickboxer in his civilian life, threw a combination of punches that Elena slipped effortlessly before sweeping his legs and pinning him with a knee across his throat. Corporal Davis, the largest volunteer at 6'6", tried to use his reach advantage to keep her at distance. Elena closed the gap in the space between heartbeats, took his back, and applied a choke that had him slapping the ground for mercy. After each demonstration, Elena explained exactly what she had done and why it worked. She answered questions, patiently corrected misconceptions, and maintained the professional demeanor that had earned her a reputation as one of the Army's finest instructors. But throughout the hour, she remained aware of Marcus Holt's presence, like a splinter under her skin. He had started making comments about 20 minutes into the demonstration. Quiet, at first barely audible to those standing next to him. But as the hour progressed, his voice grew louder, more confident, more contemptuous. "Scripted," he muttered, after Elena took down Corporal Davis. "They're all following a script." "Wouldn't work in a real fight," he said, after she demonstrated an armbar. "Not against someone who actually wants to hurt you." "Dog and pony show," he declared, after she explained the principles of leverage and momentum. "None of this matters when bullets are flying." The soldiers around him shifted uncomfortably. Some tried to distance themselves. Others looked toward the officers present, hoping someone would intervene. But Marcus Holt had built his reputation on being untouchable, and no one seemed willing to challenge him directly. Elena watched this dynamic unfold with growing clarity. She understood now why Diana had been concerned. Holt wasn't just a skeptic, he was a disruptor. He was using her demonstration as an opportunity to publicly undermine everything she had worked for, knowing that his rank and reputation would protect him from consequences. She made a decision. During a brief water break, Elena approached Colonel Whitmore. "Sir, I'd like to modify the next portion of the demonstration." Whitmore raised an eyebrow. "In what way?" "I'd like to invite volunteers who are genuinely skeptical of these techniques. Soldiers who believe that size and strength are the only factors that matter in combat." She kept her voice neutral, professional. "I think it would be more educational to address those doubts directly." Whitmore was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he nodded. "That's your call, Specialist. Just remember that this is a demonstration, not a competition." "Understood, sir." Elena returned to the center of the training ground and addressed the crowd once more. "For the next portion of this demonstration, I'd like to invite any volunteers who have doubts about what you've seen. Anyone who believes that these techniques are choreographed or that they wouldn't work against a determined attacker is welcome to step forward and test that theory." A ripple of surprise moved through the assembled soldiers. This was unexpected. Instructors rarely invited direct challenges to their techniques. For several seconds, no one moved. Then from the back of the crowd, Marcus Holt's voice rang out, clear and loud. "I'll volunteer." The soldiers around him parted like water as he walked forward. His stride was confident, almost leisurely, as if he were approaching a minor inconvenience rather than a combat demonstration. His eyes never left Elena's face. "Staff Sergeant Marcus Holt," he announced when he reached the center of the training ground. 3 combat deployments, multiple hand-to-hand encounters with enemy combatants." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "And I think this whole thing is a waste of everyone's time." Elena met his gaze without flinching. "Then let's find out." The crowd pressed closer, forming a tight circle around the 2 figures. Diana Webb moved to the front, her expression tight with concern. Colonel Whitmore remained where he was, his face carefully neutral. "The rules are simple," Elena said, her voice carrying to every corner of the training ground. "This is a demonstration of defensive techniques. I will not attack you. I will only respond to your attacks. The goal is to neutralize the threat without causing unnecessary harm." Holt laughed. "Don't worry about causing me harm. I can handle anything you've got." "That's not what I meant." Something flickered in Holt's eyes, the first hint of uncertainty. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the same contemptuous confidence he had displayed since arriving. "Whenever you're ready," Elena said. Holt didn't waste time on preliminaries. He lunged forward with a straight right punch aimed at Elena's face, fast, powerful, designed to end the confrontation in a single blow. Elena wasn't there. She had moved the instant she saw his shoulder rotate, stepping to the outside of his punch, while simultaneously redirecting his arm with a gentle touch that sent him stumbling past her. He caught himself before falling, but the surprise on his face was evident to everyone watching. "First lesson," Elena said calmly. "Don't telegraph your attacks." Holt's face reddened. He turned and came at her again, this time with a combination jab cross-hook. Each punch was thrown with genuine force, genuine speed, genuine intent, and each punch found nothing but empty air. Elena moved like water flowing around stone. She didn't block his attacks, she simply wasn't where they were aimed. Every time Holt committed to a strike, she had already begun moving, already positioned herself where he couldn't reach. "Second lesson," she said, after avoiding a particularly vicious uppercut. "Don't overcommit. Every attack that misses leaves you off balance and vulnerable." The watching soldiers were utterly silent now. They had expected to see Elena demonstrate her techniques, but what they were witnessing was something else entirely. This wasn't a demonstration. This was domination. Holt was giving everything he had, and Elena was making him look like an untrained recruit. Holt stopped attacking, breathing heavily. Sweat had begun to darken his uniform. "You're not fighting back," he accused. "You're just running away. I told you the rules. I respond to attacks. I don't initiate them. Then I'll give you something to respond to." He rushed forward with his arms spread wide, attempting to grab her in a bear hug that would allow him to use his significant size advantage. It was a crude technique, but effective against someone who didn't know how to counter it. Elena knew exactly how to counter it. She ducked under his grasping arms, pivoted, and applied a joint lock to his left wrist that brought him to his knees in less than a second. And the pressure on his wrist was precise enough to cause significant pain without causing injury. Holt gasped, his face contorting. "Third lesson," Elena said quietly, so only he could hear. "The bigger they are, the harder they fall." She released him and stepped back, allowing him to climb to his feet. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Several soldiers exchanged glances, their skepticism visibly crumbling. Diana Webb was smiling openly. Colonel Whitmore nodded almost imperceptibly, but Marcus Holt was not finished. He stood slowly, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. His left wrist hung at his side, throbbing from the joint lock. His pride, his entire sense of self, was crumbling in front of nearly 300 witnesses. "This is ridiculous," he spat. "You're making a mockery of real combat. In a real fight, I would destroy you." "Then treat this like a real fight," Elena replied. "I'm giving you permission. No rules, no constraints. Attack me like you would attack an enemy combatant." The silence that fell over the training ground was absolute. Diana Webb stepped forward. "Elena, don't..." "It's okay, Sergeant Webb." Elena's eyes never left Holt. "The staff sergeant needs to learn something important today. I'm going to teach him." Holt stared at her for a long moment. The offer hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. If he accepted and lost again, his humiliation would be complete. But if he backed down now, he would be admitting defeat in front of everyone who mattered. His pride made the decision for him. "Fine," he said. "You asked for this." He came at her with everything he had. This time there was no pretense of training or demonstration. This was violence, pure and simple. Holt threw punches and kicks with genuine intent to cause harm. His movements were faster, more aggressive, more dangerous than anything he had shown before. And Elena handled every single attack with almost contemptuous ease. She blocked a punch that would have broken her nose. She slipped a kick aimed at her ribs. She redirected an elbow strike that was heading for her temple. Each defense was precise, efficient, perfectly timed. But she still wasn't fighting back. "What's wrong?" Holt snarled between attacks. "Too scared to hit me." Elena said nothing. She simply continued defending, waiting for the moment she knew was coming. And then she saw it. Holt was getting frustrated. His attacks were becoming wilder, less controlled. He was committing too much to each strike, leaving himself open for longer periods. He was making exactly the mistake she had warned against. He wound up for a massive right hook, putting his entire body weight behind it. It was the kind of punch that could knock someone unconscious if it landed. It didn't land. Elena ducked under the swing and stepped inside his guard. Before Holt could react, she had seized his extended right arm with both hands, controlling his wrist and elbow with textbook precision. "Final lesson," she said. And then she twisted. The sound of breaking bone echoed across the training ground like a gunshot. Marcus Holt screamed. Marcus Holt hit the ground hard, his body crumpling like a puppet with cut strings. His scream tore through the morning air, raw and primal, the kind of sound that made hardened soldiers flinch. His right arm bent at an angle that nature never intended, the bones visibly displaced beneath the skin. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Then chaos erupted. "Medic! Get a medic over here now!" Colonel Whitmore's voice cut through the shocked silence, snapping soldiers out of their paralysis. Elena stood exactly where her technique had left her, her breathing controlled, her stance balanced. But her face had gone pale. She stared at Holt writhing on the ground, and something cold settled in her stomach. She had never intended this. Diana Webb pushed through the crowd and grabbed Elena's arm. "Don't move. Don't say anything to anyone until I tell you to." "Diana, I didn't mean to. I know. But right now you need to stay quiet and let me handle this." 2 medics sprinted across the training ground, their boots kicking up dust. They dropped beside Holt, who was still screaming, his face contorted in agony. One medic immediately stabilized his arm, while the other checked his vitals. "Compound fracture," the first medic announced, his voice tight. "Radius and ulna both. We need to transport him immediately." "Is there nerve damage?" the second medic asked. "Can't tell yet. But this is bad. This is really bad." The soldiers in this crowd had begun talking, their voices rising in a confused babble. Elena caught fragments of conversation around her. "Did you see that he attacked her first? Everyone saw it." "But his arm, man. Did you hear it break?" She warned him. He didn't listen. Colonel Whitmore approached Elena, his expression unreadable. "Specialist Reyes, my office, 1 hour. Sir, I can explain. 1 hour specialist. That's an order." He turned and walked away, leaving Elena standing alone in the center of the training ground as the medics loaded Holt onto a stretcher. His screams had subsided into moans, but his eyes found Elena's face as they carried him past. "You're finished," he gasped. "You hear me? Finished." Elena said nothing. She watched them take him away, watched the crowd begin to disperse, watched her entire career start to crumble around her. Diana appeared at her side again. "Come on, we need to talk before you meet with Whitmore." They walked in silence to a small office building near the edge of the training ground. Diana closed the door behind them and immediately began pacing. "Tell me exactly what happened. Every detail." Elena sat down heavily in a metal chair. "You saw what happened." "I saw part of it. I need to hear your version. The official version that you're going to give when they start asking questions." "I defended myself. He attacked me with intent to cause harm. I responded with appropriate force." Diana stopped pacing. "Appropriate force, Elena. You shattered his arm in 2 places. The Army's definition of appropriate force doesn't usually include compound fractures." "He gave me no choice." "I know that. You know that. Half the soldiers out there know that. But there are going to be people asking questions who weren't there, who didn't see Holt's face when he came at you. They're going to see a female soldier who broke a male colleague's arm during what was supposed to be a training demonstration." Elena's jaw tightened. "So what are you saying, that I should have let him hit me?" "Of course not. I'm saying that you need to be very careful about how you present what happened. The facts are on your side, but facts don't always matter when politics get involved." "Politics?" Diana sat down across from Elena, her expression grave. "Holt has connections. His father was a colonel. His uncle is currently serving in the Pentagon. People are going to be watching how this plays out, and some of them are going to be looking for any excuse to blame you instead of him. That's insane. That's the army, Elena. That's the world. Diana leaned forward. I've seen careers destroyed over less. Female soldiers who did everything right, who followed every regulation, who defended themselves exactly the way they were trained to, and they still ended up discharged because someone with more stars decided they were inconvenient. Elena felt a cold wave of fear wash over her. You think that could happen to me? I think it depends on what happens in the next few hours. If Whitmore backs you, if the witnesses support your account, if Holt's behavior is properly documented, then you'll probably be fine. But if any of those pieces fall apart... She didn't need to finish the sentence. A knock at the door made them both jump. A young private stuck his head in, looking nervous. Specialist Reyes, Colonel Whitmore, is ready for you now. Elena stood her legs, feeling unsteady for the first time since the confrontation. That was only 20 minutes. He said 1 hour. He said, now, ma'am. I'm just delivering the message. Diana grabbed Elena's hand and squeezed it hard. Remember, you defended yourself against an unprovoked attack. You responded with your training. You did nothing wrong. I know. Say it like you believe it. Elena took a deep breath. I defended myself. I did nothing wrong. Better. Now go. The walk to Colonel Whitmore's office felt like the longest of Elena's life. Every soldier she passed seemed to be watching her, whispering about her. The story had already begun to spread, and she could only imagine how distorted it would become before the day was over. Whitmore's aide showed her into the office without a word. The colonel sat behind his desk, his hands folded in front of him. Also present was Major Sandra Chen, the base's legal officer, and Lieutenant Colonel Frank Harrison, Holt's battalion commander. The presence of Harrison made Elena's stomach drop. If Holt's chain of command was already involved, this was more serious than she had hoped. Sit down, Specialist, Whitmore said. Elena sat. I'm going to record this conversation for the official record, Major Chen announced, pressing a button on a small device. Please state your name, rank, and unit. Elena Marie Reyes, Specialist, Combat Training Division. Thank you. Now, in your own words, please describe what occurred during this morning's training demonstration. Elena had expected this. She had been preparing for it since the moment Holt hit the ground. But speaking the words out loud with 3 senior officers watching her every expression was harder than she had anticipated. I was conducting an authorized demonstration of hand-to-hand combat techniques, she began. Staff Sergeant Holt volunteered to participate. During the demonstration, he became increasingly aggressive. His attacks escalated from training appropriate to genuinely dangerous. When he made it clear that he intended to cause me physical harm, I defended myself using the techniques I was trained to use. And in your assessment, Harrison interrupted, his voice hostile, breaking a man's arm in 2 places constitutes an appropriate defensive response. Sir, with respect, I didn't set out to break his arm. I applied a joint manipulation technique that I've used hundreds of times in training. The severity of the injury resulted from Staff Sergeant Holt's resistance and the force of his own momentum. So you're saying it was his fault? I'm saying that when someone attacks you with intent to cause harm, you don't have the luxury of calculating exactly how much force to use. You respond with your training and hope the outcome is survivable for both parties. Harrison's face reddened. This is absurd. Marcus Holt is one of the finest soldiers in my battalion. He has 3 combat deployments, multiple commendations. None of which were relevant when he was trying to punch me in the face, Elena said quietly. The room went silent. Harrison looked like he wanted to reach across the table and strangle her. Major Chen was writing furiously on a notepad. And Colonel Whitmore? Whitmore was watching Elena with an expression she couldn't quite read. Specialist Reyes, Whitmore said finally. I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. At any point during your interaction with Staff Sergeant Holt, did you feel that your life or safety was genuinely threatened? Elena thought carefully before responding. This was the question that would determine everything. Yes, sir, I did. Explain. When Staff Sergeant Holt said you asked for this and came at me the final time, his demeanor had completely changed. He wasn't participating in a training exercise anymore. His movements were designed to cause maximum damage. His eyes... She paused, remembering. I've seen that look before, sir, in training videos of actual combat, in footage of violent assaults. He wanted to hurt me, not demonstrate, not compete, hurt. And you have 282 witnesses who can confirm this. I believe so, sir. Whitmore nodded slowly. Major Chen, how long will it take to interview the witnesses? Several days at minimum, sir. Probably a week. Then let's get started. Whitmore turned to Harrison. Lieutenant Colonel, I understand your concern for your soldier. But until the investigation is complete, I'm going to ask you to reserve judgment. Harrison's jaw tightened. And what about Specialist Reyes? Is she being placed on administrative leave? No. Harrison's eyes widened. Sir, I said no. Specialist Reyes will continue her normal duties pending the outcome of the investigation. If the evidence supports her account, which I expect it will, there will be no adverse action taken against her. Whitmore's voice hardened. If, on the other hand, the evidence suggests that Staff Sergeant Holt initiated an unprovoked assault against a fellow soldier during an official training exercise, then we'll be having a very different conversation about his future in this army. The meeting ended shortly after. Elena walked out of the building feeling like she had just survived a minefield. The sun was higher now, the heat of the day building toward its peak, but she barely noticed. Diana was waiting for her outside. Well, I'm not suspended. Investigation is ongoing. Whitmore seems to be on my side, but Holt's battalion commander wants my head on a pike. Diana exhaled slowly. That's better than I expected. Is it because right now I feel like I'm standing on a trap door waiting for someone to pull the lever? That's because you are. But you've got 282 people who saw what happened. The truth is on your side, Elena. We just have to make sure it doesn't get buried. They walked together toward the base hospital. Elena wasn't sure why she felt compelled to go there, but something was pulling her in that direction. Maybe she needed to see Holt to understand what she had done to process the reality of bones breaking under her hands. The emergency room was quiet when they arrived. A nurse looked up from her station with mild curiosity. We're here to check on Staff Sergeant Holt, Diana said. He was brought in earlier with an arm injury. Are you fellow soldiers? We were present when the incident occurred. The nurse consulted her computer. He's in surgery right now. The orthopedic team is working on his arm. It's going to be a while. Surgery? Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. Compound fractures in both bones of the forearm. They had to insert pins to stabilize the breaks. There's also possible nerve damage that they're assessing. The nurse looked at Elena with professional sympathy. It's a serious injury. Recovery is going to take months, and he may never regain full function. Elena felt the floor shift beneath her feet. Diana grabbed her arm to steady her. Thank you, Diana said to the nurse. We'll check back later. They walked outside, and Elena leaned against the wall, her breathing rapid and shallow. This wasn't supposed to happen, she said. I've used that technique dozens of times, hundreds of times. I've never... Elena, stop, listen to me. Diana's voice was firm. You didn't do anything wrong. You defended yourself against someone who was trying to hurt you. The severity of his injury is a consequence of his actions, not yours. But his arm is broken because he attacked you. His arm is broken because he couldn't accept being outperformed by a woman half his size. His arm is broken because of his pride and his prejudice and his inability to control himself. Diana gripped Elena's shoulders and forced her to make eye contact. You are not responsible for the choices he made. Elena wanted to believe her. She wanted to accept the logic, to embrace the justification, to let herself off the hook. But she kept hearing that sound, the sharp crack of breaking bone, the scream that followed the silence of 282 soldiers who had just witnessed something they would never forget. "There's something else," Diana said quietly. "Something you need to know." "What?" "I've been doing some checking since the incident, making calls, reaching out to people who know Holt's history." Diana's expression darkened. "This wasn't the first time he's done something like this." Elena looked up. "What do you mean?" 3 years ago, he was involved in an incident with a female lieutenant in his unit. She filed a complaint alleging harassment and intimidation. The complaint was investigated and ultimately dismissed due to insufficient evidence. "What happened to her?" "She transferred to a different base, resigned her commission 6 months later." Diana paused. 2 years before that, a female sergeant in his platoon reported that Holt had cornered her in a supply room and made explicit threats. That complaint was also dismissed. She's no longer in the army either. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. "You're saying he's done this before, targeted women, made them feel unsafe. And nothing happened to him. Nothing that stuck. He's smart about it, Elena. He never leaves evidence. He picks targets who are junior to him or who don't have the support systems to fight back. And when complaints are filed, somehow they always get lost in the system. Until today. Until today, when he tried it in front of 282 witnesses with cameras and recording devices against a woman who happened to be trained to defend herself." Elena straightened slowly, the fear and guilt that had been consuming her beginning to transform into something else, something harder. "Do the investigators know about this history?" "Not yet, but they will. I'm making sure of it." "Good." The afternoon stretched on, the investigation gaining momentum like a boulder rolling downhill. Soldiers who had witnessed the incident were called in one by one to provide their accounts. Elena heard through the base's extensive rumor network that the testimonies were overwhelmingly consistent. Holt had escalated. Holt had attacked. Holt had gotten exactly what he deserved. But she also heard other things. Darker things. Some of Holt's friends were circulating a different version of events. In their telling, Elena had deliberately provoked him, had used the demonstration as an opportunity to humiliate him, had applied excessive force out of some personal vendetta. "They're trying to poison the well," Diana told her during a brief meeting that evening. "Spreading alternative narratives before the official findings come out. If they can create enough doubt, enough confusion, they might be able to protect Holt from the worst consequences." "Will it work?" "Not if we can help it. I've been talking to some of the witnesses. They're willing to provide detailed statements about everything Holt said and did leading up to the confrontation. The comments he made, the disrespectful attitude, the way he deliberately escalated the situation. And the security footage," Diana's expression shifted. "That's where it gets interesting." "Interesting how?" "The base security system recorded portions of the demonstration, but the camera angles aren't great, and there are gaps in the coverage. The footage shows the final confrontation, but it doesn't capture everything that happened before." Elena felt her stomach tighten. So Holt's people could argue that the context isn't clear. They could try, but that's where the witness testimonies become crucial. 282 people saw what happened, Elena. Even if the footage is imperfect, that many witnesses telling the same story is impossible to dismiss. Unless someone convinces them to tell a different story. Diana's face hardened. "That's exactly what I'm worried about." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the day over and over in her mind. Every punch Holt had thrown, every word he had spoken, every decision she had made that led to those final brutal seconds. She kept coming back to one moment, the instant when she had decided to invite him to volunteer. She could have ignored his comments, could have reported him through proper channels, could have let the demonstration continue without confrontation. But she hadn't. She had chosen to challenge him directly, knowing full well that it might lead to exactly what had happened. Did that make her responsible? Had she been defending herself, or had she been teaching him a lesson? And if it was the latter, did that change anything about the morality of what she had done? Her phone buzzed with a text message. She grabbed it, expecting Diana. But the number was unfamiliar, and the message made her blood run cold. "You should have let him hit you. Now you're going to pay." Elena sat up in bed, her heart pounding. She stared at the message for a long moment, then typed a response. "Who is this?" No answer came. She didn't sleep at all that night. By morning, the investigation had taken a new turn. Colonel Whitmore called her into his office at 0700, his expression grim. "Someone leaked the security footage to a military affairs website last night. It's been viewed over 200,000 times. Elena felt the room spin slightly. "What does the footage show?" "The final confrontation. Holt attacking you, you defending yourself, his arm breaking." Whitmore paused. "The comments section is a war zone. Half the people are calling you a hero. The other half are calling you a dangerous lunatic who should be court-martialed." "Sir, I had nothing to do with the leak." "I know. We're investigating that separately, but the damage is done. This is no longer just an internal matter. The whole world is watching now." He slid a tablet across the desk toward her. On the screen was a headline from a major news network: "Female soldier breaks colleague's arm in training exercise, self-defense, or assault." Elena read the article in silence, her face carefully neutral. It was more balanced than she had expected, presenting both sides of the story without obvious bias. But the comments beneath it were vicious, filled with the kind of hatred that she had learned to expect from certain corners of the internet. "What does this mean for the investigation?" she asked. "It means we need to move faster. The longer this drags out, the more time people have to spin narratives and create controversies." Whitmore leaned back in his chair. "I've authorized an expedited review. All witness interviews should be completed by tomorrow, and I'm expecting preliminary findings by end of week. And until then, you keep your head down and let the process work. Don't talk to media. Don't respond to comments online. Don't give anyone ammunition to use against you." "Understood, sir." But as Elena left his office, she knew that keeping her head down wouldn't be enough. The forces arrayed against her were already mobilizing, and if she wanted to survive this, she would need to do more than wait for the truth to save her. She would need to fight. The threatening text message sat on Elena's phone like a coiled snake, waiting to strike again. She had shown it to Diana first thing in the morning, watching her mentor's face darken with each passing second. "Forward this to Major Chen immediately," Diana said. "This is witness intimidation. It's a federal offense. We don't know it's connected to the case." "Elena, don't be naive. Someone wants you scared. Someone wants you to doubt yourself, to make a mistake, to give them ammunition." Diana's voice was sharp. "This is exactly how they operate. They can't beat you in the open, so they're trying to get inside your head." Elena forwarded the message as instructed, then sat down heavily in her quarters. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. The events of the past 24 hours had left her feeling hollowed out, like someone had scooped out her insides and left only the shell. "There's something else," Diana said. "Something I found out this morning." "What now?" "Remember the 2 women I told you about? The ones who filed complaints against Holt that went nowhere, the lieutenant and the sergeant?" "Yeah." "I tracked down the lieutenant. Her name is Rachel Torres. She's living in Virginia now, working as a civilian contractor." Diana paused. "She's willing to talk." Elena looked up sharply. "Talk about what Holt did to her, about why her complaint was dismissed, about the system that protected him for so long." Diana's eyes met hers. She's been waiting 3 years for someone to listen. 2 hours later, Elena found herself on a video call with a woman she had never met, but whose story she already knew. Rachel Torres was in her early 30s with tired eyes and a jaw that seemed permanently clenched. She sat in what appeared to be a home office, a cup of coffee untouched beside her. "I heard what happened," Rachel said without preamble. "I saw the video. I've watched it about 50 times. "I'm sorry," Elena said. "I didn't mean for it to go viral." "Don't apologize. Don't ever apologize for what you did." Rachel's voice cracked slightly. "You did what I couldn't do. You stopped him." "What happened to you if you're willing to tell me?" Rachel was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was flat, controlled, the voice of someone who had learned to discuss trauma without letting it consume her. "It started small. Comments about my appearance. Jokes that weren't really jokes. The kind of stuff that's hard to report because everyone says you're overreacting." She took a breath. Then it escalated. He started finding ways to be alone with me, in the motor pool, in the supply room, once in the parking lot after dark. "Did he touch you?" "He never had to. He made it clear what he wanted, what he would do if I didn't comply. And when I told him no, when I made it absolutely clear that I wasn't interested, he made my life hell." Elena felt sick. "How?" Suddenly, my performance reviews dropped. My equipment kept malfunctioning. I got assigned to the worst duties, the most dangerous patrols. My teammates started treating me differently, like I was contaminated somehow. Rachel's hands were shaking now. I filed a complaint, went through all the proper channels, did everything by the book. And nothing. The investigation lasted 2 months and concluded that there was insufficient evidence to support my allegations. Holt claimed I was a disgruntled subordinate trying to damage his reputation. His friends backed him up. My friends. She laughed bitterly. I didn't have friends anymore. By the time the investigation was over, I was completely isolated. So you transferred. I didn't have a choice. Staying would have destroyed me, maybe literally. Rachel wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I resigned my commission 6 months later. Couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't be part of a system that protected predators and punished victims. Elena sat in silence, absorbing the weight of what she had heard. This was the man whose arm she had broken. This was the history that had led to that moment on the training ground. Suddenly, the guilt she had been carrying felt different, lighter. "Why are you willing to talk now?" Elena asked, after 3 years of silence. "Because you changed something. When you stood up to him, when you refused to be another victim, when you put him on the ground in front of nearly 300 witnesses. Rachel's voice strengthened. "You proved that he could be beaten, that he wasn't untouchable, that the system could work if someone was brave enough to force it." "I just defended myself." "You did more than that. You showed every woman in uniform that we don't have to accept abuse, that we can fight back, that our training and our skills are just as valid as any man's." Rachel leaned closer to the camera. "I'm willing to testify. Officially. On the record. Whatever it takes to make sure Holt finally faces consequences for what he's done." After the call ended, Elena sat alone for a long time. Her mind was racing, processing everything she had learned, everything she was feeling. The guilt had transformed into something else now, something fiercer. Diana knocked and entered without waiting for a response. "How did it go?" "She's willing to testify." "Good, because she's not the only one." Diana sat down across from Elena, her expression intense. "I found the sergeant, too. Her name is Maria Gonzalez. She's still in the army stationed in Germany. And she's been waiting for this moment even longer than Rachel. How many others are there? I don't know yet. But based on what I'm hearing, Holt's been doing this for years, systematically targeting women, harassing them, intimidating them, and using his connections to escape accountability every single time." Diana's jaw tightened. "Until you." The expedited investigation moved faster than Elena had expected. Major Chen and her team worked around the clock, interviewing witnesses, reviewing footage, compiling evidence. By the third day, the picture that emerged was damning. Of the 282 soldiers who had witnessed the confrontation, 267 provided statements supporting Elena's account. They described Holt's aggressive behavior, his disrespectful comments, his clear intent to cause harm. Several soldiers specifically mentioned that they had expected someone to intervene before things got out of hand. The security footage, despite its limitations, clearly showed Holt lunging at Elena with violent intent. Frame-by-frame analysis revealed his expression in the moment before the final technique, pure rage, undisguised and uncontrolled. And then the other testimonies started coming in. Rachel Torres flew in from Virginia to give her statement in person. She sat in Major Chen's office for 4 hours, recounting every detail of what Holt had done to her 3 years earlier. Her voice never wavered. Her facts never changed. Maria Gonzalez testified, via video link from Germany, her story eerily similar to Rachel's. The same pattern of escalation, the same isolation tactics, the same rigged investigation that concluded with no action taken. 3 more women came forward after that, then 5 more, then 8. By the end of the week, Major Chen had documented a pattern of behavior stretching back nearly a decade. Marcus Holt had targeted at least 14 women during his military career. 14 women whose complaints had been dismissed, whose careers had been derailed, whose lives had been permanently altered by a predator the system refused to stop. Until now. Colonel Whitmore called Elena to his office on the 7th day after the incident. His face was grave, but there was something else in his eyes, something that looked almost like satisfaction. "The investigation is complete," he said. "I wanted you to hear the findings before they're officially announced." Elena sat down, her heart pounding. "What's the verdict?" "You acted in justified self-defense against an unprovoked assault. Staff Sergeant Holt clearly exceeded the boundaries of the training exercise and initiated violence against a fellow soldier. Your response was consistent with your training and proportionate to the threat you faced." Elena exhaled slowly. "So no charges against me? No charges, no adverse action. Your record remains clean." Whitmore paused. "But that's not all. What else?" "Based on the evidence gathered during this investigation, including the testimony of numerous witnesses who came forward to report previous incidents, Staff Sergeant Marcus Holt is being recommended for discharge under other than honorable conditions. Additionally, the Army's Criminal Investigation Division has opened a separate inquiry into potential criminal charges related to his treatment of female soldiers over the past decade." Elena felt the words wash over her, each one carrying weight she hadn't expected. This was more than vindication. This was justice. "The women who came forward," she said quietly, "are they protected?" "They will be. I'm personally ensuring that anyone who testified in this investigation is shielded from retaliation. If anyone tries to punish them for telling the truth, they'll answer to me." Whitmore's voice hardened. "This should have happened years ago. The system failed those women, and I will not allow it to fail them again." "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You're the one who stood up when it mattered. You're the one who refused to be another silent victim." Whitmore stood and extended his hand. "Your father would be proud, Elena. I know I am." Elena shook his hand, but her mind was already moving to the next question. What happens now? With the viral video, the media attention, all of it. That's actually what I wanted to discuss. The story has taken on a life of its own. Every major news network wants an interview. The Secretary of the Army's office has been fielding calls all week. There's even talk of congressional hearings about harassment in the military. And you want me to, what, go on television? I want you to consider it, not as a requirement, but as an opportunity. Whitmore sat back down. You've become a symbol whether you intended to or not. A symbol of women fighting back. A symbol of justice finally being served. You have a platform now, and how you use it could influence policy changes that affect every woman in uniform. Elena thought about Rachel Torres, about Maria Gonzalez, about the 12 other women whose names she had learned over the past week. She thought about her father, about what he would want her to do. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I ask. Elena left Whitmore's office and walked across the base, her mind churning. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and orange. Soldiers passed her, some nodding in recognition, others stopping to salute. Word had spread. Everyone knew who she was now. Diana fell into step beside her. I heard the news. Congratulations. Thanks. Doesn't feel real yet. It will. Give it time. Diana was quiet for a moment. There's something else you should know. About Holt. What about him? He's awake, out of surgery. The doctors say he'll live, but his arm will never be the same. Permanent nerve damage, limited mobility. He'll probably be medically discharged regardless of what the investigation concluded. Elena nodded slowly. Has he said anything? That's the thing. He's been asking to see you. Elena stopped walking. Excuse me. He's been asking for you specifically, won't tell anyone why. The hospital staff are confused. His lawyer is furious, but he keeps insisting that he needs to talk to you. Why would he want to talk to me? I have no idea. But I thought you should know. Diana studied her face. You don't have to go. You don't owe him anything. Elena thought about it. The logical part of her brain screamed that this was a trap, that Holt was trying to manipulate her, that nothing good could come from confronting the man whose career and body she had destroyed. But another part of her needed to see him, needed to look him in the eyes and understand what had driven him to become the person he was. Needed closure that she knew she couldn't get any other way. I'm going, she said. Elena, I have to. I need to see this through. The base hospital was quiet when Elena arrived. A military police officer stood outside Holt's room there to ensure he didn't leave before the legal process was complete. He checked Elena's credentials and stepped aside without comment. The room was small and sterile. Marcus Holt lay in the bed, his right arm immobilized in a complex arrangement of pins and bandages. He looked smaller, somehow diminished the massive presence that had dominated the training ground, reduced to a broken man in a hospital gown. His eyes opened as Elena entered. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. You came, he said. His voice was raspy, weakened by pain medication and surgery. You asked for me. I didn't think you would actually show up. He tried to shift in the bed and winced. Close the door. Elena considered refusing, then decided it didn't matter. She closed the door and remained standing near it, ready to leave at any moment. Why did you want to see me? She asked. Holt was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, quieter, almost vulnerable. I've been lying here for a week, staring at the ceiling, asking myself how I ended up here, how a routine training demonstration turned into... He gestured weakly at his shattered arm. This. You attacked me. That's how. I know. I know I did. He closed his eyes. But I keep asking myself why. What was it about you that made me lose control like that? Elena waited. It wasn't just that you were better than me. I've been outperformed before. I've lost sparring matches. I've been corrected by superior officers. He opened his eyes and looked at her directly. It was that you were everything I was afraid of. Afraid of... When I was growing up, my father taught me that men were supposed to be strong, that women were supposed to be lesser, that the natural order of things put men on top and women beneath. He laughed bitterly. I believed it. I built my entire identity around it. And then I joined an army where women could fight alongside men, where they could outrank me, outperform me, prove that everything my father taught me was a lie. So you targeted them, made them pay for challenging your worldview. I didn't see it that way at the time. I told myself I was just maintaining standards, that I was pushing people to be better, that the complaints were coming from people who couldn't handle real military life. He paused. But lying here with nothing but time to think, I can't pretend anymore. Elena felt something shift inside her. Not sympathy, she would never feel sympathy for this man, but something like understanding, something like recognition of the forces that had shaped him. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you deserve to know that what happened wasn't your fault. Not really. I would have found a way to hurt someone eventually. You were just the one brave enough to stop me. His voice cracked. Slightly. I've destroyed so many careers, so many lives, and I never once stopped to ask myself if I was the problem. And now I have nothing but time to ask that question. He looked at his broken arm. I'll probably never regain full use of this. My military career is over. My reputation is destroyed. Everything I built, everything I thought I was, it's all gone. You did that to yourself. I know. And that's the worst part. I can't even blame you as much as I want to. He met her eyes again. You were just the mirror that finally showed me who I really was. Elena stood in silence, processing what she had heard. This wasn't an apology. Holt hadn't actually said he was sorry. But it was something. An acknowledgement. A recognition of responsibility that she hadn't expected. The women you hurt, she said finally. They're going to testify against you. Every single one of them. Their stories are going to become public record. I know. You'll probably face criminal charges. Prison time. I know that too. His voice was flat, defeated. I'm not going to fight it. What would be the point? The truth is out there now. Fighting it would just make things worse. Elena moved toward the door, then stopped. One question remained, the one that had been burning in her mind since the moment he had asked to see her. In that final moment when you came at me with everything you had, what were you trying to do? What did you think was going to happen? Holt was quiet for a long time. When he answered, his voice was barely above a whisper. I was trying to prove that everything I believed was still true, that men were still stronger, that women still couldn't compete. He closed his eyes. I was trying to prove that my father was right and the world was wrong. And now I know that my father was the lie, and the world kept moving forward while I tried to hold it back. Elena opened the door and stepped out without another word. She didn't look back. The next morning she sat across from Colonel Whitmore and told him she was ready. Ready to speak publicly. Ready to become the symbol that everyone seemed to need her to be. Ready to fight for the women who had come before her and the women who would come after. Are you sure? Whitmore asked. Once you step into that spotlight, your life will never be the same. Elena thought about her father, about Rachel and Maria and all the others, about the man lying in a hospital bed finally forced to confront the person he had become. I'm sure, she said. It's time to change the system, and I know exactly where to start. The first interview request came from CNN, then NBC, then ABC, CBS, Fox News, and every major newspaper in the country. Within 48 hours of Elena's decision to go public, her name had become the most searched term on the internet. Diana handled the logistics while Elena prepared mentally for what was coming. They chose a single interview to start a prime-time special with a veteran journalist known for asking tough questions, but treating her subjects fairly. The interview would air live, reaching an estimated 20 million viewers. You don't have to do this, Diana reminded her the morning of the broadcast. You can still back out. I know, but I'm not going to. Why not? Elena thought about the question seriously before answering. Because for 10 years, women in the military have been told to stay quiet, to handle things internally, to not make waves. And for 10 years, predators like Marcus Holt have used that silence as a weapon. So you're going to break the silence? Someone has to. And apparently that someone is me. The interview took place at a studio in Washington, D.C. Elena wore her dress uniform, every medal and ribbon perfectly positioned. She had earned those decorations through years of dedication and sacrifice, and she wanted the world to see them. The journalist, a woman named Catherine Price, who had covered military affairs for 3 decades, greeted Elena with a firm handshake and genuine warmth. Thank you for doing this, Catherine said before they went on air. I know it can't be easy. It's necessary. That's what matters. The lights came up. The cameras began rolling, and Elena Reyes told her story to the world. She started with her father. With growing up in a military family, learning to fight before she could read, understanding from the earliest age that service and sacrifice were the highest callings a person could answer. She talked about his death in Afghanistan, about the grief that had nearly destroyed her, about the decision to honor his memory by following in his footsteps. Then she talked about what she had found when she joined the army. I expected challenges, she said. I expected to have to prove myself. What I didn't expect was to encounter a system that actively protected predators while punishing the people who tried to stop them. Catherine leaned forward. Can you give us specific examples? I can give you 14. 14 women who reported harassment or assault by Marcus Holt over the past decade. 14 women whose complaints were dismissed, ignored, or actively suppressed. 14 women whose careers were derailed while their abuser continued to be promoted and protected. The numbers hit home. Elena could see it in Catherine's face, in the way the production crew shifted uncomfortably behind the cameras. This wasn't abstract anymore. This was specific, documented, undeniable. And what happened when you encountered Staff Sergeant Holt? Catherine asked. Elena told the story carefully, accurately, leaving nothing out. The demonstration, the comments, the escalation. The moment when Holt had crossed the line from training to assault. And finally the technique that had shattered his arm in front of 282 witnesses. Do you regret what you did? Catherine asked. Elena was quiet for a moment. This was the question everyone wanted, answered the question that would define how the public perceived her. I regret that it was necessary, she said finally. I regret that a man who should have known better allowed his prejudice to override his judgment. I regret that 14 women suffered before anyone was willing to stand up and say enough. She paused. But do I regret defending myself against someone who was trying to hurt me? No, I will never regret that. The interview aired that night. By morning it had been viewed over 50 million times. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Messages flooded in from all over the world from female soldiers who had faced similar situations, from survivors who saw their own stories reflected in Elena's words, from parents who wanted their daughters to know that they could fight back. But there were also other messages, darker ones. You're a disgrace to the uniform. Women don't belong in combat. I hope someone does to you what you did to him. Elena read them all, cataloging the hatred, understanding that this was the price of visibility. For every person who supported her, there was someone else who wanted to tear her down. Diana found her at 3 a.m., still awake, still scrolling through messages. You need to stop, Diana said, taking the phone from her hands. This isn't healthy. I need to understand what we're fighting against. You already understand. You've understood since you were 16 years old and your father died because the military couldn't protect its own. Diana sat down beside her. This isn't about understanding anymore. This is about self-destruction. Elena looked at her mentor, at the woman who had guided her through every challenge since she joined the army. How did you do it all those years ago when you were one of the first women in your unit? How did you survive the hate? Diana was quiet for a long moment. I almost didn't. What do you mean? There was a time about 15 years into my career when I seriously considered ending everything. Not just my career, everything. The pressure was too much. The isolation was too complete. I had spent so many years fighting just to exist in a space that didn't want me, and I was exhausted. Elena stared at her. In all their years together, Diana had never shared this. What changed? I met someone. A young recruit who reminded me of myself at that age. She was struggling, facing the same barriers I had faced, and she came to me for advice. Diana smiled slightly. That's when I realized that my survival mattered. Not just for me, but for everyone who would come after. If I gave up, if I let them win, then all the women who looked to me for guidance would lose hope too. Who was the recruit? Diana looked at her directly. Your father introduced us. It was you, Elena. You were 16 years old, and your father brought you to meet the woman he trusted most in the military. He wanted you to see that women could succeed, could lead, could change things from the inside. Elena felt tears forming and didn't try to stop them. I don't remember that meeting. You were grieving. You had just lost him. But I remember it clearly. I looked at you, and I saw the future. A future where women like us wouldn't have to fight so hard just to be seen as equals. Diana gripped her hand. And now that future is here. You're making it happen. The congressional hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after the interview aired. Elena was called to testify before the Armed Services Committee, alongside Rachel Torres, Maria Gonzalez, and 8 of the other women who had come forward with complaints against Marcus Holt. The hearing room was packed. Cameras lined the walls. Senators sat in a row, their faces grave, their questions prepared. This was the highest level of scrutiny the military's handling of harassment cases had ever received. Elena was the first to testify. Specialist Reyes, the committee chairman, began. You've become something of a symbol over the past few weeks. A symbol of women fighting back against harassment and abuse. How do you feel about that? I feel that symbols are fine, but systemic change is better. I didn't break Marcus Holt's arm to become famous. I did it because he gave me no other choice. The question we should be asking isn't why I fought back. It's why the system failed to stop him before I had to. The chairman nodded slowly. Can you elaborate on what you mean by systemic failure? Marcus Holt harassed and intimidated at least 14 women over a 10-year period. During that time, multiple complaints were filed, multiple investigations were conducted, and every single time the system concluded that there was insufficient evidence to take action. Elena leaned forward. How is that possible? How does a predator operate openly for a decade without consequences? The answer is that the system isn't designed to catch predators. It's designed to protect them. A murmur ran through the hearing room. One senator, a woman who had served in the Navy decades earlier, spoke up. Specialist Reyes, what changes would you like to see implemented? First, independent investigation of harassment complaints. Currently, complaints are investigated within the chain of command, which creates obvious conflicts of interest. Second, protection for accusers. Women who come forward should not have their careers destroyed while their abusers continue to be promoted. Third, mandatory training on recognizing and responding to harassment, real training, not checkbox exercises that nobody takes seriously. She continued for nearly an hour, laying out a comprehensive vision for reform that she and Diana had developed over weeks of intense discussion. The senators listened, asked questions, took notes. Some seemed skeptical. Others seemed genuinely moved. Rachel Torres testified next, then Maria Gonzalez, then the others. Each woman told her story with dignity and courage, adding her voice to the chorus that was finally being heard. By the end of the day, the committee chairman made an announcement that stunned everyone in the room. Based on the testimony we've heard today, I am calling for a comprehensive review of military harassment policies across all branches. Additionally, I am introducing legislation that would implement many of the reforms suggested by Specialist Reyes and the other witnesses. This is not just about one predator or one incident. This is about changing a culture that has failed too many of our service members for too long. The legislation was named the Military Accountability and Protection Act. Elena watched from the gallery as it was debated on the floor of Congress as amendments were proposed and defeated as the final vote was called. It passed by a margin of 78 to 22. Elena stood in a hallway outside the Senate chamber, surrounded by Rachel Maria and the other women who had testified. They held hands in a circle, tears streaming down their faces as they absorbed the magnitude of what had happened. "We did it," Rachel whispered. "We actually did it." "No," Elena said. "We started something. The doing isn't finished yet. It's just beginning." The news of the legislation's passage spread rapidly. Within hours, military bases around the world were buzzing with the implications. The reforms would take months to implement, but the message was clear. The era of protected predators was coming to an end. Marcus Holt watched the coverage from his hospital bed. His arm had healed as much as it ever would, leaving him with permanent nerve damage and limited mobility. His military career was officially over. His reputation was destroyed, and now the system that had protected him for so long was being dismantled piece by piece. He had one visitor that day. His father, Colonel Robert Holt, retired. The old man sat in a chair beside the bed, his face hard, his disappointment evident. "You've disgraced this family," Robert said. "Everything I built, everything I taught you, you've thrown it all away." Marcus stared at the ceiling. "Everything you taught me is why I'm here. Excuse me. You taught me that women were inferior, that they didn't belong in positions of power, that a real man dominated and controlled." Marcus turned his head to look at his father. "And when I believed those things, when I acted on those beliefs, I destroyed my life and the lives of at least 14 other people. You're blaming me for your failures. I'm seeing clearly for the first time, and what I see is a bitter old man who poisoned his son with hatred and called it strength." Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. "I don't want you to visit me again. I don't want to hear your voice or see your face. Whatever relationship we had is over." Robert Holt stood abruptly, his face red with fury. "You'll regret this." "Maybe. But I regret a lot of things. At least this won't be one of them." The old man left without another word. Marcus lay alone in the silence, staring at the ceiling, contemplating a future he had never imagined and wasn't sure he wanted. 3 months after the legislation passed, Elena received a letter. It came through official military channels, but the handwriting on the envelope was personal, unfamiliar. She opened it cautiously and found a single page covered in neat, cramped script. "Specialist Reyes, you don't know me, but I know you. My name is Amanda Chen. I'm a sergeant stationed in South Korea. 3 years ago, I was harassed by a superior officer. I didn't report it because I had seen what happened to women who did. I stayed silent and watched as other women were targeted the same way. After I watched your testimony, I found the courage to speak up. I reported what happened to me, and because of the reforms you fought for, my complaint was actually investigated. My abuser was held accountable. My career wasn't destroyed. I'm writing to say thank you, not just for what you did in that training ground, but for everything that came after. You changed things. You changed the system. You changed my life. Sincerely, Amanda Chen. Elena read the letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and placed it in her desk drawer alongside the photograph of her father. Diana found her an hour later, still sitting at her desk, staring at nothing. "What's wrong?" Elena handed her the letter. Diana read it, then looked up with tears in her eyes. "This is what it was all for," Elena said quietly. "Not the legislation, not the headlines. This. One woman who found the courage to speak because someone showed her it was possible. You showed her it was possible. We showed her. All of us. Every woman who testified. Every person who supported us. Every voice that joined the chorus." Elena stood and walked to the window. "My father used to say that real strength wasn't about overpowering others. It was about lifting them up, making them stronger than they were before." He was a wise man. He was. And I think finally I understand what he meant. Elena turned to face Diana. "I've been thinking about what comes next. And I want to teach. Not just combat techniques, I want to teach everything I've learned. About standing up for yourself. About fighting systems that don't work. About finding your voice when everyone is telling you to stay silent." Diana smiled. "What did you have in mind? A training program, comprehensive, for every woman entering military service. Combat skills, yes, but also leadership development, advocacy, training, support systems." Elena's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "I want to create something that will outlast me. Something that will keep changing things long after I'm gone. That's ambitious. That's necessary." One broken arm started a conversation. One piece of legislation started a change. But lasting transformation requires more. It requires institutions that will survive regardless of who's in power or what political winds are blowing. Diana nodded slowly. "Then let's build it. Together." Elena extended her hand. Diana took it. "Together," Elena agreed. Outside, a new class of recruits was arriving at Fort Braxton. Young men and women from every corner of the country ready to begin their military careers. They carried with them the dreams and fears of a new generation, the hope that they could make a difference, the uncertainty of not knowing what the future would hold. Among them was a young woman named Jessica Torres, Rachel Torres's younger sister. She had watched her sister's testimony. She had seen what courage could accomplish, and she had decided to follow in footsteps that had been carved through fire and pain and ultimately triumph. She didn't know yet that Elena Reyes would become her instructor. Didn't know that the woman who had started a revolution would be the one to train her for whatever came next. But she would learn. They all would learn. The lesson had been brutal, but the learning was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the legislation was signed into law. Elena stood at the front of a training facility that hadn't existed a year ago, watching as 52 women in military uniforms completed their final evaluation exercises. The Elena Reyes Combat Leadership Academy had been Colonel Whitmore's idea. He had pushed it through every bureaucratic obstacle fought, every budget battle silenced, every critic who said it was too ambitious, too expensive, too focused on a single demographic. "This is your legacy," he had told her when the funding was finally approved. "Make it count!" She intended to. Jessica Torres was among the graduates. Rachel's younger sister had proven herself to be one of the most talented recruits Elena had ever trained, combining natural athletic ability with a fierce determination that reminded Elena of herself at that age. "Instructor Reyes," Jessica approached after the evaluation was complete, her face flushed with exertion, but her eyes bright with accomplishment. "I wanted to thank you for everything. You earned your place here. I just provided the opportunity. It's more than that. And you know it. Jessica hesitated. My sister told me something last week. Something she's never told anyone else. What? She said that before your interview aired, she was planning to take her own life. She had the date picked out, the method chosen, everything. She felt like her story didn't matter, like nothing would ever change, like she had suffered for nothing. Jessica's voice cracked slightly. And then she watched you speak. She saw someone finally telling the truth. And she decided to wait one more day, then one more, then one more. Elena felt her chest tighten. I didn't know that. She wanted me to tell you. She wanted you to understand that what you did, it wasn't just about legislation or policy changes. You saved her life, literally. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of those words settling between them. Tell your sister something for me, Elena said finally. Tell her that she saved herself. I just reminded her that she was worth saving. Jessica nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I will. Diana found Elena later that evening, sitting alone in her office, staring at the wall where she had hung a collection of letters from women whose lives had been changed by the reforms. You missed dinner, Diana said. I know. I was thinking. About what? About how strange it is. One morning, I woke up thinking I was going to prove that my combat program deserved army-wide adoption. By noon, I had shattered a man's arm in front of nearly 300 witnesses. And now? She gestured at those letters at the facility outside her window, at everything that had grown from that single moment of violence. Now this. Regrets. No, not about what I did. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Holt had just stayed in the crowd, if he had kept his mouth shut, if he had been smart enough to recognize that his prejudice was a weakness, not a strength. Diana sat down across from her. Then he would have continued hurting women. The system would have continued protecting him, and nothing would have changed. I know, but 14 women suffered before I stopped him. 14 women whose lives were altered forever because nobody was willing to stand up until I did. Elena shook her head slowly. I keep thinking about them, about what their lives would have been like if someone had stopped him sooner. You can't save people retroactively, Elena. You can only do what you can do in the moment you're in. I know that too, but knowing it doesn't make it easier to accept. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young lieutenant stepped in, looking nervous. Instructor Reyes, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. Who is it? She says her name is Sarah Holt, Marcus Holt's sister. Elena and Diana exchanged glances. In all the months since the incident, no one from Holt's family had reached out. His father had been publicly disgraced after details of his own history of harassment came to light during the congressional hearings. His mother had issued a brief statement condemning her son's actions before retreating from public view. But a sister, Elena, hadn't even known he had one. Send her in, Elena said. Sarah Holt was nothing like her brother. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, with soft features and eyes that held more sadness than anger. She entered the office hesitantly, clearly uncertain of her welcome. Thank you for seeing me, she said. I know you have no reason to. What do you want? Sarah took a deep breath. I want to apologize. Not for Marcus, he needs to do that himself, if he ever becomes capable of it. I want to apologize for my family, for the culture that created him, for the beliefs that were passed down through generations like a disease. Elena studied her carefully. Why now? Why come to me after all this time? Because I've been watching what you've built here. I've seen the women you've trained, the lives you've changed, the system you've helped reform. Sarah's voice trembled slightly. And I realized that I could either spend the rest of my life hiding from what my family did, or I could try to be part of the solution. What are you proposing? I'm a psychologist. I specialize in treating trauma survivors, particularly women, who have experienced harassment and assault in professional settings. Sarah met Elena's eyes directly. I want to offer my services to your program, free of charge, for as long as you'll have me. Diana leaned forward. Why would you do that? Because I spent my entire childhood watching my father and brother treat women as objects to be controlled. I listened to the things they said, saw the way they behaved, and I was too scared to speak up. I became complicit through my silence. Sarah's hands were shaking now. This is my chance to make amends, to use the skills I've developed to help undo some of the damage that people like my family have caused. Elena was quiet for a long moment. This was not what she had expected, not even close. Your brother nearly killed me, she said finally. He came at me with genuine intent to cause serious harm. If my training had been even slightly less effective, I might be the one with permanent injuries right now. I know, and I have no defense for what he did. He was wrong. Completely, totally, unforgivably wrong. Sarah's voice broke. But I'm not him. I'm not my father. I'm not the legacy they tried to create. I'm just a woman who wants to help other women. And I thought maybe you of all people might understand what it's like to be judged by associations you didn't choose. Elena looked at Diana, who gave a slight nod. We'll start with a trial period, Elena said. 3 months. You'll work with our counseling team, provide support to graduates who are struggling with the transition back to regular units. If it works out, we'll discuss something more permanent. Sarah's face flooded with relief. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be hard. Some of the women here know your name, know your family's history. They're not going to trust you automatically. I understand. I'll earn their trust, however long it takes. After Sarah left, Diana turned to Elena with raised eyebrows. That was unexpected. It was. But maybe that's the point. Elena stood and walked to the window. Real change doesn't just mean punishing the people who did wrong. It means creating space for people who want to do better, even people connected to the worst of what came before. Your father would have said the same thing. He did say it. Many times. Elena smiled slightly. I'm only now starting to understand what he meant. The anniversary of the incident arrived without fanfare. 1 year since Elena had shattered Marcus Holt's arm in front of 282 soldiers. 1 year since the video went viral. 1 year since the world had learned her name. She spent the morning teaching a class on advanced defensive techniques, then the afternoon in meetings about the program's expansion to other military bases. By evening, she was exhausted, but satisfied, ready to collapse into bed and forget about anniversaries and legacies and everything else. Then her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made her answer. Elena Reyes. The voice was male, tentative, uncertain. Speaking. This is Marcus Holt. Elena's blood ran cold. She hadn't spoken to him since that day in the hospital, hadn't thought about him in months. Why was he calling now? What do you want? I want to apologize. Properly. For real. His voice was different than she remembered, quieter, more hesitant, stripped of the arrogance that had defined him. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. I just need you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. Why now? Because today's the anniversary. Because I've spent the last year in therapy working through everything that made me the person I was. Because I finally understand the full extent of what I did, and I can't live with myself if I don't at least try to acknowledge it. Elena gripped the phone tightly, emotions warring inside her. Anger, suspicion, and something else. Something that might have been the beginning of closure. What do you expect me to say? Nothing. You don't have to say anything. I just needed to speak the words out loud to you specifically. I attacked you. I tried to hurt you because you challenged everything I believed about myself. And when you defended yourself, when you proved that all my assumptions were wrong, I blamed you instead of looking in the mirror." He paused, and she could hear him struggling to continue. "I've been following what you've built, the academy, the reform, the lives you've changed. And I realized that the worst moment of my life became the best thing that ever happened to the women who serve in our military." His voice cracked. "I don't know how to process that. I don't know how to live with being the villain in a story that ended up helping so many people." "You're not the villain," Elena said quietly. "You're a cautionary tale. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes, villains don't change. They don't apologize. They don't spend a year in therapy trying to understand why they hurt people." She took a deep breath. "I don't forgive you, Marcus. I'm not sure I ever will. But I believe that you're trying to become a different person than you were." "That's more than I deserve." "Probably. But it's what I have to offer." The call ended shortly after. Elena sat alone in the darkness of her quarters, processing what had just happened. She had spent a year hating Marcus Holt, using that hatred as fuel to drive her forward. Now she felt something shifting inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but something like release. The hatred had served its purpose. She didn't need it anymore. Diana called the next morning with news that made Elena's heart stop. "There's been an incident at Fort Campbell. A female officer was assaulted by a male colleague during a training exercise." "How bad?" "Bad. She's in the hospital. He's in custody." Diana's voice was tight with anger. "Elena, the reforms we fought for, they worked. The complaint was taken seriously. The investigation is already underway. The perpetrator is facing real consequences." "Then why do you sound upset?" "Because it shouldn't have happened at all. We changed the system, but we didn't change the people. Men are still attacking women. The violence is still happening. We just made it easier to address after the fact." Elena closed her eyes. This was the truth she had been avoiding for months. The legislation was a success. The academy was changing lives. But the underlying problem, the culture that taught men like Marcus Holt and his father that women were lesser, that violence was acceptable, that power meant domination, that problem was bigger than any law could solve. "Then we keep fighting," she said. "We keep training. We keep building. We accept that this is a generational battle, not a single campaign. And we make sure that every woman who serves knows that she has the skills and the support to defend herself when the system fails. That's not enough. It's what we have. And we make it be enough because the alternative is giving up, and I refuse to give up." Diana was silent for a long moment. "Your father really did teach you well." "He taught me everything I know. I just wish he was here to see what I've done with it." The cemetery was quiet when Elena arrived. She walked the familiar path to her father's grave, the route she had traveled dozens of times over the past decade. But today felt different. Today, she was coming not as a grieving daughter, but as a woman who had finally found her purpose. She knelt beside the headstone and traced the letters of his name with her fingers. "Hey, Dad, it's been a while." The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a bird sang. "I did it. Everything you taught me, everything you prepared me for, I used it. Not just to defend myself, but to change things, to make things better for people who will never know my name." She pulled out the photograph she had carried since his death, the one that had sat on her nightstand through every assignment, every challenge, every moment of doubt. "I met your friend Diana. She told me what you said about me, how you thought I had surpassed you. I didn't believe it at first. I still don't know if I believe it now. But I understand what you meant when you said that real strength is about lifting others up." She placed a small stone on top of the headstone, a tradition her father had taught her from their Jewish neighbors when she was young. "I'm teaching now, training women to be strong, to fight back, to never accept being treated as less than they are. I built an academy in your honor, and every woman who graduates carries a piece of you with her." A tear rolled down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. "I miss you every day. I think about what you would say, how you would react, whether you would be proud. And I finally know that you would be, because I became the person you always believed I could be." She stood slowly, her knees aching from the cold ground. "I love you, Dad. Rest easy. I've got it from here." She walked back to her car without looking back. There was work to be done. 3 years later, Elena stood on a stage at the Pentagon receiving the Distinguished Service Medal from the Secretary of Defense herself. The auditorium was packed with military leaders, politicians, journalists, and most importantly, graduates of the academy she had built. Sergeant Elena Reyes has demonstrated extraordinary courage, leadership, and dedication to the welfare of our service members, the Secretary announced. Through her actions and her advocacy, she has fundamentally changed how our military addresses harassment and supports women in uniform. The applause was thunderous. Elena looked out at the crowd and saw Diana beaming with pride, saw Rachel Torres and her sister Jessica sitting side by side, saw Sarah Holt, now a permanent member of the academy staff, wiping tears from her eyes. She saw the 282 soldiers who had witnessed that morning at Fort Braxton, many of whom had traveled across the country to be present for this moment. And in the front row, she saw a seat that had been left empty with a folded American flag resting upon it. A tribute to her father, who had made all of this possible. "I accept this medal on behalf of every woman who has served in silence," Elena said when she reached the microphone. "Every woman who was told to stay quiet. Every woman who fought back and was punished for it. Every woman who gave up because the system gave her no other choice." She paused, gathering herself. "This medal belongs to the 14 women who suffered before I stopped Marcus Holt. It belongs to the thousands who came forward after. It belongs to every future service member who will never have to face what we faced, because we refused to accept that this was just the way things were." She looked directly into the camera that was broadcasting her speech to military bases around the world. "To every woman watching this, you are not alone. You are not powerless. You have the right to defend yourself, to speak up, to demand better. And if the system fails you, if the people who should protect you become the ones who harm you, fight back. With everything you have, because your strength is not measured by the weight you can lift or the distance you can run. It is measured by your refusal to be broken." She stepped back from the microphone as the auditorium erupted in applause. Later that night, alone in her quarters at Fort Braxton, Elena opened her desk drawer and pulled out the photograph of her father. She propped it against the lamp on her nightstand and lay down on her bed, staring at his face. "We did it, Dad," she whispered. "We really did it." She slept soundly for the first time in years. The next morning she woke before dawn and walked to the training ground where everything had changed. The same packed earth, the same morning sun beginning to rise, the same space where one moment of violence had sparked a revolution. A new class of recruits would arrive in 3 hours. 57 women ready to learn everything she had to teach. Elena Reyes stretched her muscles, centered her breathing, and prepared to begin again. Because the fight was never truly over. The work was never truly done. And as long as there were women who needed strength, there would be women like Elena, ready to provide it. He had made the first move that morning, and the lesson he learned in front of 282 soldiers was brutal. But the lesson Elena taught about courage, about standing up, about refusing to accept injustice, that lesson would echo through generations. And that was a legacy worth fighting for.